You're not going to believe what I'm about to tell you. Even now, when I walk past that oak tree on the south fence line, the memory comes back like it's carved into the dirt itself. The tire ruts are still there, fossilized in hard clay, silent proof of the day everything started to unravel. For generations, our troubles had been simple. Rain too early or too late, a calf slipping under the fence, a bull testing the posts. We were ranchers. We knew how to fix weathered boards, mend wire, and work with whatever nature threw at us. But what we weren't ready for was a neighborhood of identical beige roofs sprouting up where pasture used to be, and with it, a group of people who thought a clipboard and a decal gave them the power to run my land. The subdivision next door called itself Cedar Ridge Preserve, though there wasn't much preserved about it. Just rows of houses squeezed together, driveways copy-pasted like someone stamped them out of a mold. For a century, the line between us and them had been simple. 3 strands of barbed wire, a concrete marker tucked in the grass, and the unspoken respect that fences mean something. That line had kept peace longer than I'd been alive. Then one morning, a golf cart with a shiny Cedar Ridge Safety Patrol sticker rolled right over that marker and parked under our oak tree like it was some kind of designated rest stop. I wanted to believe it was a mistake. New folks get turned around, and I'd rather extend a hand than a fist. So I walked over slow, palms open, trying to keep my voice neighborly. "Afternoon," I said. "This shade belongs to us. Your boundary is back there by the stake." The driver, hiding behind mirrored sunglasses, gave me a look sharp enough to cut wire. His jaw clenched, and when he finally spoke, it wasn't the words of a lost neighbor, it was a warning. "We're aware, just observing. Community safety." His partner, a skinny kid gripping a clipboard like it was a badge, piped up, "We're allowed to be here." The words hit me wrong, not just because they were false, but because of how proud he sounded, like he'd rehearsed them. I kept my tone calm. "Not on this side of the fence. You're not. Please keep to your property." They idled back across the wire as if they were doing me a favor, the driver smirking the whole time. And in that smirk, I saw the storm that was coming. It was the look of someone who believed he'd found a soft spot, a place he could press again and again. I stood there staring at that concrete marker, swallowed halfway by grass, and I knew they weren't finished. Some people only stop when the fence bites back. That night, I told my grandfather. Earl was on the porch, sharpening his pocket knife in that slow, steady rhythm that means he's listening harder than he looks. I laid it all out. The patrol, the trespass, the way they dismissed me like I was a guest on my own land. He didn't say much, just spit neatly into the flower bed, then muttered, "Some folks only learn when the fence bites." My gut tightened, because when Earl said things like that, it was never just words, it was a promise that something was about to change. The following week they came back. First the golf cart, then a white SUV with the same decal. Same routine, same spot under our oak, same arrogant posture like they were checkpoint guards. I put up bright yellow private property signs along the line, big enough that even a blind man could see them. By morning, one was gone, the other stomped with a boot print. I took pictures. I started a log with dates, times, and plate numbers. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was Earl's voice in my head, but I knew a paper trail might matter more than a fistfight, because this wasn't just about trespassing anymore. It was about a group of people testing whether we'd roll over and let them redraw our boundary one smirk at a time. I thought about letting it slide, about keeping the peace. But then came the day that still makes my blood boil. It was hot enough that the air clung to your shirt, the kind of heat that makes cattle restless. I was working a first calf heifer, slow and steady, guiding her and her baby back toward the herd. Out of nowhere, the white SUV bounced over the rough ground and parked right where I'd been working all morning. The noise spooked the cow. She bolted, calf crying behind her. Hours of patient work erased in seconds. I walked toward them, calm but sharp, the kind of calm that comes when you're angry enough to see clear. "You just undid my whole morning," I said. "Get off my land now." Clipboard kid cleared his throat, pretending he had authority. "We're ensuring there's no suspicious activity." I almost laughed at the absurdity. "Suspicious activity is you playing police on the wrong side of the fence," I shot back. The driver leaned on his mirrored shades like he thought they made him invincible. "Mr. Wentworth says our presence is beneficial to community relations." That was the first time I heard the name Wentworth, HOA president, and clearly the one pulling the strings. I leaned in, low and deliberate. "Let me teach you something about relations. You're one call away from a sheriff's report." Something in my voice must have hit home because they finally pulled back. Engines growling, dust spraying behind them. My ranch hand Louise had been watching from the fence line. He walked up beside me, hat low against the sun, his voice quiet. "Patron," he said, "they don't respect you. They don't respect the land." He was right, and hearing it said out loud lit a fire in my chest. That night, I didn't just log the incident. I called our lawyer, Maya. She listened the way she always does, her mind building a case even before I'd finished my story. "Trespass is trespass," she said. "The HOA has zero authority on your side. If they ignore your signs and walk into conditions you've lawfully created, that's on them. Earl didn't need more than that. He was already sketching in the dirt with the toe of his boot, mapping something only he could see. They always parked the same way, he muttered. Same angle, same tires on the line. Creature of habit is the easiest critter to catch. I should have known right then that Grandpa wasn't just sharpening his knife anymore, he was sharpening a plan. Grandpa's plan was simple, mean, and 100% ranch logic. He called it watering the seedbed. To anyone else it would look like ordinary irrigation, but to us it was going to be the fence finally biting back. We picked a square of ground no bigger than 20 by 20 feet, directly under that oak where the patrol always parked. You'd walk past it 100 times and never give it a thought. But Earl was right, habit makes fools predictable. We ran the tiller just deep enough to loosen the soil without showing it. A shallow bowl, barely noticeable, shaped with the kind of precision only in old ranchers I can find. Then we buried a half-inch water line at dusk, plumbing it to 3 brass sprinklers salvaged from Earl's barn. They were antiques, the kind that used to throw arcs of water across half the south pasture back when irrigation pumps ran loud enough to shake the windows. Earl cleaned them with a toothpick, muttering curses soft as hymns, then wired them to a battered mechanical timer pulled from a milk crate. Even patrols get lazy, he said, twisting the dial so the cycles were unpredictable. Best to keep M guessing by the time we dressed the patch with creek clay and compost. It looked like any other piece of pasture. Dark, rich soil, sticky when wet, heavy enough to glue itself to your boots. Standing back, Earl crossed his arms like a general surveying his battlefield. We're just keeping the moisture right under that oak, he said with a deadpan so straight it nearly fooled me. But I caught the gleam in his eye. This wasn't irrigation. This was a lesson in respect. That night, rain fell, a summer shower polite enough to fool anyone, but to us it was the perfect primer. At 10:32 the next morning, as if the universe itself was keeping score, the white SUV rolled into view, the same driver with the mirrored shades, same clipboard kid slouching in the passenger seat. They slid right into the spot like destiny had reserved it for them. Clipboard reclined his seat, took off his sunglasses, closed his eyes. The arrogance of a man who thinks the world exists for his nap. At 10:35 sharp, the pump coughed awake. 3 steel heads rose like prairie dogs and blasted that SUV with a crossfire of brown stock tank water. The sound was like gravel striking glass, hard and relentless. The driver fumbled the ignition, panicked, stomped the gas. The rear tires spun, screaming, then sank. Within seconds, the whole vehicle slid sideways into the shallow bowl of muck we'd engineered. It was like watching a bar of soap vanish in slow motion. The sprinklers clattered on, painting them over and over until the timer clicked off like a judge's gavel. The doors creaked open. Clipboard kid tried to step out, his shiny shoes sinking up to the laces on the first try. He flailed arms windmilling, then landed in the mud with a splat loud enough to make Grandpa choke on his own laughter. Through the binoculars, Earl's shoulders shook, tears in his eyes. Unexpected irrigation, he muttered. Happens to the best of us. I don't think I've ever seen him that happy without a fishing rod in hand. But the humiliation didn't stop with mud. 20 minutes later, a black Lincoln Navigator rolled up on the HOA side. Out stepped Colin Wentworth himself, salmon polo and white golf shoes so clean they looked illegal. He strutted to the fence, nostrils flaring like a gelding that had just caught the scent of a cougar. What is the meaning of this? He barked. Your contraption has disabled our security vehicle. This is willful vandalism. Earl tipped his hat like he was greeting an old friend at the feed store. Name's Earl McCready, he said calmly. This here's my grandson. That patch you're hollering about, that's our land. Looks like your boys parked in our erosion control swale. Wentworth's face went red. Erosion control. You turned it into a bog on purpose. I stepped forward so he could see the mud caked on my boots. We've sent letters. We've put up signs. Your people ignored all of it. We're irrigating our soil. If you don't like the conditions on my property, then don't drive onto my property. Wentworth jabbed his phone with a trembling thumb. I'm calling the sheriff. This is aggression. Good, I said evenly. While you're at it, ask them to bring the file I already sent with your patrol's dates, times, and plate numbers. Wentworth froze at that. For the first time I saw uncertainty crack his polished mask. 10 minutes later, a county deputy pulled up Alvarez, a woman I knew from wildfire drills, calm/steady, the kind of authority that doesn't raise her voice because she doesn't need to. Wentworth launched into a speech rehearsed to the syllable. Hazards, malicious intent, damaged vehicles. Alvarez didn't interrupt. She paced the fence, found the concrete marker, swallowed in grass, measured the distance, then turned back with a sigh. Mr. Wentworth, she said, professional but tired. That vehicle is on the rancher's land. He's free to water his soil however he wants. You were warned not to park here. Whatever happened to your SUV is a civil matter between you and your insurance. My advice: respect the boundary. Or next time I'll be writing citations. Wentworth's jaw tightened, his face the color of a ripe tomato. Shades stared at his ruined shoes. Clipboard pretended to study the clouds. A tow truck came, struggled in the mud, nearly got stuck itself before hauling the SUV out like a carcass. Earl watched the whole scene in silence, lips curled just enough to show he was satisfied. The fence had finally bitten back, and the bite left marks no HOA meeting could wash away. A week later, the letter arrived. Heavy cream paper, gold-embossed law firm name that sounded more like a furniture outlet than a practice. Inside, the words dripped with outrage. They accused us of creating a hazardous condition, demanded thousands for damages, and ordered us to cease what they called aggressive irrigation practices. Reading it, I almost laughed. Aggressive irrigation. They made it sound like we were weaponizing rain. Earl leaned back on the porch, iced tea in hand, and muttered, "Sounds like somebody's dry cleaning bill got expensive." But the laughter didn't last long. HOA letters are designed to scare you, to make you doubt yourself, to bury you under language so official it feels like scripture. I took the envelope, walked down to the fence line, and let the wind in the cottonwoods steady my pulse. Fear fades when you remember the truth is on your side. Then I walked back inside, scanned every page, and forwarded it to Maya. If anyone could turn their lavender-scented threats into ash, it was her. Her reply came the next morning, sharper than barbed wire. She reminded their counsel that Cedar Ridge had zero jurisdiction outside its platted boundaries. She included photos of their patrol vehicles parked in front of our marker, close-ups of the boot print on our busted sign, and the smug email where Wentworth himself suggested we better delineate. She reminded them trespassers assume risk, and that any damage to their SUV was a matter for their insurance. Then, with a flourish only Maya could pull off, she added that we'd be seeking damages for destruction of property and interference with livestock operations. She even offered, sarcastically, a paid consultation on drought-resistant landscaping, since their patrol seemed confused about moisture management. Earl laughed so hard at that line he nearly spilled his tea. The letter war fizzled out after that. No more invoices, no more threats, but word travels fast in subdivisions where gossip moves quicker than irrigation pumps. Folks from Cedar Ridge started showing up at the feed store with tight smiles and muttered complaints. I heard grumbles about security budgets, tow truck bills, and meetings where residents asked why they were paying for patrols that couldn't even tell a fence from a freeway. HOA pride might be thick, but nothing thins it like wasted money. Still, the patrol didn't vanish. They changed their tactics. Now they'd creep right up to their side of the line, idling like predators who've learned to sniff the fence but not cross it. They'd stare across the wire at the dark soil of our swale, engines humming, faces tight with caution. Then, like kids who'd touched a hot stove, they'd back away slow, as if the mud itself could reach out and drag them in again. It wasn't surrender, it was hesitation. And hesitation, Grandpa said, is the first step toward respect. But we didn't sit idle either. Earl insisted on tuning the land. Never waste a good swale, he said, and we turned that trap into something useful. A proper contour, layered with topsoil, shaped to capture rain and slow runoff. We planted roses along our side, old-fashioned, thorny ones that smell like every good memory you've ever had but will tear a cardigan to shreds if you get too close. We set new private property signs in steel posts, sunk deep in concrete, not the flimsy kind you can kick down in a fit of arrogance. The oak kept its shade for the cattle, the deer, and us. What once was a battlefield became a piece of living armor. Neighbors started noticing. Some Cedar Ridge folks would drive to the boundary, cut their engines, and just sit quietly watching cattle graze through the grass like waves on a tide. They'd nod at me, I'd nod back. For a moment, peace felt possible, but peace with an HOA is always fragile, and I knew in my bones that Wentworth wasn't done not yet. Men who build their lives on control don't give up just because their white shoes got dirty. The hooks were still tightening, even if they weren't visible yet. Louise, ever the quiet observer, told me one evening as the sun bled across the ridge, "Patron, snakes don't stop when you cut the grass. They just wait for you to forget they're there." I knew he was right, and as much as I wanted to, we believed the mud lesson had stuck. I couldn't shake the feeling that another test was coming. One louder, one nastier, one designed to break more than just patience. And in that silence, sitting on the porch with Earl watching fireflies spark over the swale, I realized something important. The fight wasn't just about land anymore. It was about respect. About whether a man's word and a century-old fence line still meant anything in a world where clipboards and decals tried to pretend they were the law. It didn't take long before Wentworth tried again. That man wasn't built to swallow humiliation quietly. A week of silence, then two, then a slick SUV appeared at the line late one afternoon. Headlights on, though the sun was still high. This time there was no clipboard kid, no mirrored shades. It was Wentworth himself. Salmon polo traded for a starched button-down, sleeves rolled like he thought he was ready for hard work. He stepped out, phone in hand, pacing the line like a general reviewing his troops, except his troops were just him. A man with expensive cologne and no respect for fences. I watched from the porch, binoculars steady. Earl was next to me, knife in his hand, running slow circles across a wet. "What's he after now?" I muttered. Earl didn't even look up. "A man like that don't come alone unless he's laying bait. Let him sweat. We'll see what he thinks he's catching." At 6:15 sharp, another car arrived, this one a glossy sedan with a county seal on the door. Not law enforcement, not the sheriff, code enforcement. My gut tightened. Wentworth wasn't bringing patrols anymore. He was trying to bring the county itself. A man in khakis and a tie stepped out, clipboard ready. They talked for a while, Wentworth gesturing toward our swale, then pointing at our roses like they were barbed wire from a war crime. The inspector scribbled notes, nodded too often, then snapped photos. Earl's eyes narrowed. There it is. He's trying to turn the county into his new patrol. The next morning, a letter came pinned to our gate. Official paperhead stamped and signed. Notice of potential code violations. They claimed our swale was an unpermitted alteration of natural drainage and our roses were hazardous vegetation. Hazardous roses. Earl barked a laugh so sharp it startled the chickens. They'll be outlawing bees next. But underneath the humor was steel. This wasn't a patrol with smirks anymore. This was bureaucracy, weaponized. And that made it dangerous. We called Maya immediately. She didn't even let me finish reading the notice before she cut in. Let me guess. Signed by a junior inspector named Phelps. My silence must have told her enough. Phelps is green. He doesn't know land law from lawn care. They're fishing, hoping you'll fold. Don't fold. Her voice carried that courtroom certainty I'd learned to trust. Send me the letter, and hold steady. I'll handle this, but waiting for lawyers doesn't mean waiting idle. Out here, you don't just defend with paper. You defend with proof. Earl had me haul out the old survey markers, the plat maps yellowed with age but still legally binding. We walked the line, drove stakes deeper, painted them bright red so even a blind inspector couldn't miss them. Paperwork and posts, Earl said. Together they talk louder than any HOA letter. 2 days later, Deputy Alvarez stopped by on her own. She leaned against her cruiser, arms folded, eyes scanning the roses. Word is Wentworth's stirring pots downtown, she said. I wanted you to know some of us aren't buying it. Keep your records straight. Don't give him a crack to slip through. Then she tipped her hat and left, leaving nothing but dust and reassurance in her wake. Hooks like that, orcs like that, authority-choosing truth kept me steady even when the storm clouds gathered. Because they did gather. That weekend, a Cedar Ridge newsletter landed in mailboxes. Someone slipped me a copy. Right on the front page. In bold letters, community under threat from neighboring ranch hazards. They painted us as reckless, accused us of flooding land, endangering property values, even hinted at unlicensed agricultural activities. It was propaganda dressed as neighborhood news. I read it twice, then passed it to Earl. He didn't say a word, just set it down, picked up his tea, and stared at the horizon. Finally, he said, they just declared war with paper. Time we answer with paper sharper than theirs. The hooks pulled tighter every day. Neighbors who once nodded now stared longer. Trucks slowed on the road. Even Louise noticed. Patron, he said, one evening they're painting you as the villain. Be ready, a storm built on words still brings lightning, and he was right. Wentworth wasn't finished with patrols or sprinklers. He wanted to break us with reputation, to drown us in letters and whispers until we gave up the fight. But what he didn't understand was that Earl and I had lived our whole lives under storms fiercer than him. You don't fold just because the wind howls. You set your boots deeper, tie your gates tighter, and wait for the lightning to strike where you already planted your proof. Maya didn't waste time. The following Monday she walked straight into the county office, heels clicking like gavel strikes. By noon she'd sent me a copy of her filing. It was more than a reply, it was a scalpel. She cited the plat maps showing our swales sat well inside the ranch boundary. She included decades-old permits authorizing water diversion for livestock management. She attached photos of the HOA's patrol vehicles parked on our side, every boot print, every broken sign. And in the final paragraph she warned the county that any continued harassment would be considered collusion with a private entity outside its jurisdiction. The inspector's notice, she wrote, was null void, and an embarrassing misuse of public resources. It was the kind of letter that makes even seasoned bureaucrats swallow hard. 2 days later the code violation vanished. No follow-up, no fines, nothing but silence. The county folded, and with it, Wentworth's newest weapon turned to dust. Earl, read the filing 3 times, grinning wider each pass. Paper beats paper, he said. Every time. But Wentworth wasn't built to lose gracefully. That weekend Cedar Ridge held an emergency HOA meeting. Someone who shopped at the same feed store slipped me notes from it. Wentworth stood in front of a restless crowd, railing about hostile ranchers and community safety. But this time the crowd didn't nod, they grumbled. Questions rose. Why were dues funding endless tow truck bills? Why were they paying legal fees for battles they never asked for? Why was their president obsessed with a fence line when their own subdivision had potholes and broken street? Wentworth dodged, blustered, sweated under the fluorescent lights, and for the first time, his grip on Cedar Ridge began to slip. Meanwhile, peace returned to the ranch. The swale bloomed with grass after the rain. Roses grew taller. Cattle moved easy through the pasture. Deputy Alvarez stopped by 4 eggs, leaning against her cruiser with the calm of someone who'd seen storms pass before. Louise got a raise and a new pair of boots, because we were both tired of scraping clay off the old ones. And Grandpa sat on the porch each evening, iced tea in hand, looking down at that hedge of roses like a man who knew he'd planted more than thorns, he'd planted respect still. Sometimes I'd catch sight of a Cedar Ridge SUV creeping along their side, engine low, windows down. They never crossed the fence again. They'd slow, stare at the swale, then back away like kids who'd once burned their hands on a hot stove. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was respect. Maybe it was just the memory of mud clinging to white shoes. Whatever it was, it kept them honest. People still ask me if I regret it, if I feel guilty for turning soil into a trap. And my answer is always the same. I tried polite. I tried emails. I tried explaining a concrete marker like a kindergarten teacher sounding out the alphabet. This wasn't about sprinklers or mud. It was about respect. You respect a fence because it tells the truth about where you end and someone else begins. And if you won't listen to the truth, sometimes a little water and clay have to do the talking. Grandpa says what he's proudest of isn't the trap at all. It's the paper trail. We did it right, documented, consulted, kept it safe and legal on our side of the line. He grins when I bring up the day Wentworth's navigator showed up. White shoes on a ranch, he says, shaking his head. There's your first mistake. And every time, we laugh. Because sometimes justice isn't a courtroom or a sheriff's badge. Sometimes justice is mud, sunlight, and proof. Now when I walk past that oak tree, I don't just see tire ruts. I see a reminder. A reminder that boundaries matter, that respect matters, that you can't bully your way past a fence line guarded by proof and patience. The roses bloom thick, the swale drinks the rain, the cattle graze like they always have, and for the first time in months, there's quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like peace. So I'll leave you with this. What would you have done? Gone straight to a judge, turned the whole pasture into a moat, or set a timer and let the lesson soak in? Drop your thoughts below, because trust me, there's nothing I love more than a good debate about right, wrong, and the fences in between. And if you've dealt with your own suburban empire, share what worked. If you're one of the lucky few with an HOA that actually respects the ranch next door, I want to hear that too. Hit like if you enjoyed Grandpa's Landmines. Hit subscribe if you want more true-to-life tales from the edge of the map. And until next time, keep your gates latched, your cameras rolling, and your sprinklers, well, you know where the timer is.